It's Women's Wednesday, so I thought I would talk about someone that I absolutely love because I'm a very, very big fan of ballet. I go to the ballet a lot. I love it. I've been going for years. I just adore everything about it. And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about somebody who I'm a very big fan of, which is the amazing ballet dancer Margot Fonteyn, who is, to this day, she's the prima ballerina assoluta, which basically means even though she's not dancing anymore, in fact she's not even alive anymore, she remains the sort of de facto prima ballerina for the Royal Ballet, and I just love her, and she's an icon in the ballet world. So I thought I would take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Margot Fonteyn. So there's Women's Wednesdays, arty. I think she fits the bill perfectly. So she is, she's actually, well, a Londoner, or as near to a Londoner as you can kind of be. She was born in Surrey, so just outside London. And her name was not Margot Fonteyn at all. It was Margaret Hookham, and she was known as Peggy, so Peggy Hookham. And she took Fonteyn as a sort of part of her mother's maiden name, which was Fontes. And so she sort of, when she became a dancer, she took that as her stage name and used Margot instead of Margaret. Which sounds much more glamorous, doesn't it? Margot Fonteyn, not Margaret Peggy Hookham. And so she started studying ballet at the age of 4 in Ealing in West London. I've got some friends who live in Ealing, so that's where she started out, and it was very clear very, very quickly that she had an aptitude for ballet. Her father moved to Shanghai for work, and so the family went with him, and she started studying there under a guy called George Goncharov, and he was a very, very big ballet tutor, and it was very clear very, very quickly that she was had an amazing talent for ballet. So when she came back to London, she started training at a ballet school that doesn't exist with the same name anymore. It was called the Sadler's Wells Ballet School. Now, Sadler's Wells Ballet School is the forerunner to the Royal Ballet School. And she debuted with a ballet that was known as the Vic Wells Ballet back then, which will later become Royal Ballet, in 1934 at the age of 15. They could get dancers starting quite a lot younger then. So at 15, she started with the Vic Wells Ballet. So just a kind of little note about the Royal Ballet before we go much further. The Royal Ballet was founded in 1931, not as the Royal Ballet. It was founded by a lady called Ninette de Valois, and she was an Irish-born dancer. She had spent a lot of her career dancing with Serge Diaghilev for the Ballet Russe, which is a hugely important forerunner of modern ballet. The Ballet Russe are just incredible, and they occasionally do exhibitions on them and all sorts of things. They don't exist anymore. And she decided that she wanted to create a ballet school and a company that could rival the quality of the Ballet Russe. And so that's what she did, and Ballet Russe actually closed when their founder, Diaghilev, died. And so she, Ninette de Valois, came back to London. She collaborated with a lady called Lillian Bayliss, which is a name that if you are a theatre goer in London, you will know that name, because there are so many theatres and auditoriums named after Lillian Bayliss. And Lillian Bayliss was a theatrical producer and a theatre owner. She owned the Old Vic Theatre, which still exists today, and the Sadler's Wells Theatre, which also still exists today. And so, collaborating with Lillian Bayliss, they gave the ballet company the name the Vic Wells Ballet, and that's how it started. And it was also a ballet school as well. She also, what Ninette de Valois was very clever at doing is, once the Ballet Russe closed down, she got a load of the very famous stars from the Ballet Russe and brought them into this new ballet company that she'd started. And including, there was a guy called Constant Lambert, who was a composer, and she brought him in as a sort of founder musical director, if you like. And so he was a very big deal, and they worked together an awful lot. But she brought in some of the huge, huge stars from the Ballet Russe, and immediately had, a lot of publicity, a lot of amazing dancers to create these works with. She lost the link with the Old Vic, so eventually the ballet was renamed Sadler's Wells Ballet in 1939, and it stayed at the Sadler's Wells Theatre. And in 1946, they were asked to be resident at the Royal Opera House, which was amazing. And 1946, if data sort of firing things off in your brain, is just after the end of the Second World War. And the Second World War was quite a big deal for Ninette de Valois' ballet company, because she'd spent sort of 8 years or so really forming this amazing ballet company with all these huge stars. War hits in 1939, and it's essentially, potentially could sort of sound the death knell for ballet, or at least for her company. However, it was decided that the ballet company needed to carry on as morale for the troops, and so that's what they did. What happened as well is they started out by, in 1940, I think it was, they were told that they're going to go on tour, and they went over to Europe, or continental Europe. They went over to the Netherlands, France and Belgium on a tour. Now this is 1940, weird way to say it, 1940. It's during wartime. And they landed, they did loads of amazing concerts and performances, and then on the 6th of May, they played The Hague, and they did this amazing performance in The Hague. And 4 days later, The Hague was invaded by the Nazis. Now, this was obviously very, very tight, and the ballet company was kind of lucky to escape. They had to hide in their hotel for the best part of 3 days, and eventually managed to escape in the hold of a cargo ship whilst being bombed as they were coming back. And it turned out afterwards, there were a few questions that said of the Foreign Office, why did you know that this was going to happen? Did you send the ballet company there? And they admitted that actually they did know about the invasion plans, but they didn't want to cancel the tour because they thought it would compromise the military intelligence that had got them to that point. So it's amazing, really. So they luckily escaped, and then the ballet company went on, there's only about 16 of them at the time, including Margot Fonteyn. They went on a tour around the country, and they were keeping morale up, they were playing to troops. It was pretty tough at the start, it was sort of empty halls, but at the end, everyone was really, really into the ballet. And nowadays, if you see a modern full-length ballet, ballet dancers will get through 2 to 3 pairs of point shoes easily in one performance. Actually, I've just realised I haven't shown you a picture of Margot yet. So let me bring up a little pic of her. Let's go for one of her dancing, I think. Oh no, tell you what, I'm going to show you Ninette de Valois. This is Ninette de Valois on the left, bending down with this is actually during the Second World War, 43 I believe, 42, 43, and she is in a rehearsal with her ballet company. So they're going around the country, normally 2 to 3 pairs of shoes per performance, and they are using 1 pair for 18 days, and their feet were just a mess. Really kind of bearing the brunt of this and playing in freezing sort of hangers and to people who weren't necessarily that into ballet, but they really, really brought the morale up, and they got people really, really interested in ballet. Up until then, it had been, the rich set people in their furs and their tiaras, and this is where the normal people start to really get into ballet. And so this is what Margot Fonteyn is doing as well. She had joined at the age of 15, as I mentioned, and shortly after she joined, just about a year later, Alicia Markova, who was one of the Ballet Russ's huge stars, had come over to this ballet company. She left. And so Margot started taking on a load of these classical roles that Alicia had been doing. And she very quickly became very, very popular. She rose very quickly to prima ballerina within the company. And then at the end of the Second World War, they'd been asked to be resident at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and they then reopened the Royal Opera House in 1946, is when they actually moved into the Opera House to be resident ballet. And I have a picture of it here. Well, I shouldn't have a picture of it, but I have a picture of the guests. And if you have a look at this is the Queen Mother and the King right in the middle, Queen Mary on the right, and then Princesses Elizabeth and Margaret on the far left. So they were present for the opening of this. And this is where Margot danced in this performance. It was Sleeping Beauty, and it was garnered huge praise, huge amount of success, and it really kind of laid the foundations for this new ballet company moving into Covent Garden. It had become hugely popular, and so had Margot. She'd become a massive icon. Let me bring up a picture of her dancing. Here we go. And she became a bit of a muse for one of the choreographers who was there, a guy called Frederick Ashton. Now, he was very, very strongly linked in with the Royal Ballet Company. This is him. He's an amazing choreographer. His works are still danced today. And she kind of became a muse for him, and he started creating works for her, from Sylvia to Cinderella's, whole variety of works that are still danced regularly, that he basically wrote for her. And she became very famous. She was famous in the UK, but she was famous around the world, and they were going on worldwide tours. She was getting huge critical acclaim. And also, in the USA, she appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. And the Ed Sullivan Show was something that was hugely popular at the time, and it was really she was instrumental on that show of increasing interest in classical dance over there. Now, in all this period, dancing is happening. She's dancing these amazing roles to the point where in 1956 the Royal Ballet becomes actually the Royal Ballet. Instead of the Sadler's Wells Ballet, it becomes the Royal Ballet. It's given a royal charter, and this is the same year that Margot herself is given her damehood. So she's Dame Margot Fonteyn from this point. The year before, she'd actually married. She'd married a guy called Roberto Arias, who was from Panama. He was the ambassador to the UK. They'd met, they'd fallen in love, and they'd got married. Now, at this point, you kind of think, well, she's, you know, she might be wanting to sort of move away and start to kind of think about retiring and settling down with him. And she kind of does. She dances for a few more years. But something amazing happens in 1959. 1959, she is arrested in Panama. I say amazing in terms of kind of incredible. She's arrested in Panama. Her husband is accused of starting to try and start a coup against the government, which is actually what happened. It is said that possibly he had had help from Fidel Castro in Cuba, but not 100% sure about that. And he's trying to kind of bring arms into the country. And what she does is she creates a decoy. She sails off in her boat, creates a decoy. He manages to escape. And she is arrested and held for 24 hours by the government. Now, she pleads guilty to it. She basically says, yeah, you know, I did it, in the hope that they'll be more lenient. And they extradite her to New York. Now, her husband, I'm going to show you a picture of them together. Here they are. This is Roberto with Margot. Her husband escapes and they meet back up in Brazil. And they don't return to Panama for quite some time. So she carries on dancing. And 1962, she's 42 years of age, which for a dancer is, you know, pretty damn good. Normally, you know, around that period of time, if you're still dancing, you would be expecting, you know, to maybe start retiring. And she does start thinking about retirement. What happens is that they bring in a new chap, a guy called Rudolf Nureyev, and I'm going to bring up a picture of Rudolf Nureyev here, who is a Russian dancer. He dances at the Kirov Ballet, and the Kirov changed its name. It now exists as the Mariinsky Ballet, so it's still around. And he's an incredible dancer, but he has just defected from Russia. When he was in Paris, he defects to the West. He's 23 years of age. She's 42. And they bring him into the Royal Ballet to come and dance. And by this point, she has given up. Well, she's no longer sort of permanent at the Royal Ballet. She is a freelance dancer. She is dancing for a whole variety of people, but still guesting an awful lot at the Royal Ballet. They bring in Rudolf Nureyev, and I absolutely love these pictures of them. Rudolf Nureyev is just the most incredible dancer. I love him so much I have a tea towel with his face on. That is how much I love Rudolf Nureyev. So they bring him in, they start dancing together, and it is instantaneous. Their bond is incredible. They start dancing together in 1962, and they premiere with Giselle. Someone says they met him. Oh my goodness, you met Rudolf Nureyev. Mind blown, incredible. So they start dancing together. Giselle is their first one, and very, very quickly it's obvious that they are the most incredible dancing couple together. The bond they have is huge. They're electric, and the sort of the reviews they're getting are just out of this world. And she goes on to dance with him for a further 15 years, which takes her well into her 50s. And this is dancing. Often when dancers get a bit older, they come and they do character roles, which are, you know, they're sort of amazing. Like you might see, I don't know, the mother or the grandmother, people sort of sweeping in and doing the story. She's dancing on point. She's dancing properly, kind of the classical roles until her mid to late 50s, which is insane. And one of the reasons that she does this is when they are dancing together, they're often on tour in, I think it's 1964. They're often touring, I believe, Australia, and Margot receives news that her husband has been shot, and he's been shot 4 times. Now, she doesn't know quite how bad it is. She does the performance that night, and then she heads back to her husband and finds out he's been shot 4 times, and he's been paralysed. He's now quadriplegic. I'm just going to bring up that picture of them again. Right there. This is shortly after he was shot. And so suddenly, on her hands, she has this pull between wanting to kind of retire, but also still, you know, loving dance, and having to take care of her husband. And she decides that actually his medical bills are far too high, so she has to keep dancing. And that's one of the reasons she dances so long. So she's caring for him. She actually brings him over to England, to the Stoke Mandeville Hospital, which is a spinal injuries unit, and has him cared for there while she's going off and dancing, and she's going on tour with Nureyev. And actually, one time they tour to America, this is them with Fred Astaire. I love this picture. At the end of a performance. In 67, I think it is, they actually both get arrested. They are in San Francisco It's the middle of the night. There's a wicked party going on in Haight-Ashbury, which is the sort of the heart of the hippie 60s movement. And the pair of them are arrested for smoking pot at this party. It's fine. They're let out eventually. But I just love that these two are kind of having an amazing time together, and their bond is incredibly great. So they danced for 15 years together, and when she goes from full-time dancing about 72, she then moves into sort of part-time dance and bits and pieces. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to show you a little clip of the two of them dancing. Now, this is in Romeo and Juliet, and I Now, when she retires in 1979, fully retires, she actually goes back to Panama with her husband, and they live on a cattle farm. This is a picture of her on that cattle farm. You can't hear me. Why can't you hear me? You can't hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, over the music. Okay, fine. That's fine. Okay, so she's in this cattle farm in Panama, and this is a picture of her on this cattle farm. And she... even when she was there, she used to keep a really strong bond with Nureyev. They would speak several times a week. And she actually said to him, I have developed a love of cattle farming. She raised a huge herd of cattle, and she absolutely loved it. And the whole time she is looking after her husband. And the medical bills are absolutely ruining her. It costs an awful lot to take care of him. And what Nureyev is doing is anonymously paying her bills. He's flying back and forth. She becomes ill as well. In 1989, and it's shortly before her husband dies, she develops ovarian cancer. And Nureyev, even though he's still dancing, he's still incredibly busy, he flies back and forth to see her, and she's travelling to Texas to get care, and he's paying these bills without her knowing. And then in 1990, her husband's died by this point, the BBC broadcast a documentary on her. And Nureyev is talking about their incredible bond and how they have dancing together was just the best thing he's ever done. And in this documentary, the extent of her financial worries come to light. And what they decide they're going to do is to put on a gala to raise money for her. She's struggling with cancer. This cancer, she will actually die from the cancer in the end. And they think they're going to put on this gala in Covent Garden at the Opera House. Nureyev danced, Placido Domingo came and sang, huge members of the ballet world, and Princess Diana was in the audience as well. It was a really big deal, and they raised £250,000 in a trust to look after her. She came over for this, and she looked incredibly frail. I'm trying to see if I've got another picture of her. Oh, this is Covent Garden, the Royal Opera House as it is today. Absolutely beautiful, one of my favourite places to go. And she came to this. There is video of her there. There's a lovely documentary on the BBC they did a couple of years ago. I don't know if it's on at the minute. It might be on YouTube or something about this. And so she came back. It was lovely to see. She looked absolutely tiny and really, really frail. And she was at this performance. She then went back to Panama. And shortly after that, I think the following year, she died. And she's still buried. She is buried in Panama with her husband. She converted to being Roman Catholic, so she could be buried with him. And she remains one of the greatest dancers ever. She remains the prima ballerina assoluta of the Royal Ballet, and she's an inspiration and a trailblazer, and I absolutely adore her. And the last thing I'm going to show you is, again, I know I've talked a lot about Westminster Abbey as somewhere that I love to go, we love to guide, and in there is one of my favourite plaques, and this is the plaque to the founders of the Royal Ballet. So you have Nanette de Valois at the top, Frederick Ashton, the choreographer, Constant Lambert, the composer, and at the bottom is Margot Fonteyn. None of them are buried there, but they are all commemorated there at the heart of Westminster Abbey in Poets' Corner, which I just think is lovely. So there we go, that's my little chat about Margot Fonteyn. If you want to see anything more about her, there are myriad videos of her on YouTube. She's just incredible, and you know, her name pops up in ballet films and documentaries, people citing her even now as an inspiration to the world of ballet and to their own performances. So there we go. If ever you want to go to a ballet, Royal Opera, they do people think it's really expensive. They do tickets from about £5. It is possible to get cheap tickets. I'm there all the time. I absolutely love it. So there we go. So that was Margot Fonteyn for Women's Wednesdays. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be back tomorrow with my lovely friend Jenna Boyd, and then the following day my friend Lee Ingleby, talking about firstly tomorrow's West End theatre and what it's like being on the West End. Jenna is currently starring in Come From Away, so she'll tell us all about that. And then the following day it will be film and TV filming in London. So there we go. Thank you all for coming today. I'll see you again tomorrow at 3. Take care. Bye.